Hi, I'm Kasra Farahani. I'm a production designer working on film and television.
Well, welcome to Minded. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Well, first and foremost, congratulations. You coming off this amazing success with the new Fantastic Four. Everything I've been reading about it, nobody forget to mention how wonderful the production design it is. So I guess you are feeling pretty good right now.
You know what? I am absolutely feeling very good that my team and myself, really all the brilliant, talented people in my department, in the art department, in the set decoration department, in the props department, in the construction department, and the special effects department are being recognized for the kind of amazing world that everybody was able to come together to create for this movie.
That's fantastic. Are you the type of person that allow yourself to enjoy the moment and now just kind of take it out in or to give a little tap in your back? Good job, you did good here, or you already jump on to the next thing?
You know what? It's a good question. I think not probably not as much as we should. Uh, you always, it's difficult when you work on a project so with so much emotional investment. Uh, Especially, motion picture projects, especially the larger ones, they're very intensive. There's a huge amount of work to do in a very short time. So you're completely immersed in it in order to achieve everything. So as a result, when you finish, it's very difficult to see the product uh, through the process. What you see is the process, and you see the things that, for me, unfortunately, mostly what I see most are the things that I wish I had done something a little bit differently, or I had more time with, or something like that. Um, but that's why it's so helpful to see through the eyes of fans and the audience, that they're happy with what we made, and that is something that I do like to take some time to reflect on and try to enjoy, um, and think about.
You mentioned about is that was something that you want to tweak or there was no enough time to do exactly what you want. Is that some sort of a personality trait you always had it with you as a kid? Were you always that person or that kid that always want a little bit more time to go a little bit further?
You know what? I mean, I think I don't know exactly when it came up. I definitely think in the college that I went to, school here in Southern California called Art Center College of Design, which is a very intensive design school. I think the work ethic and the perfectionism, to a great extent, probably comes from that training, where you try to make everything as perfect as possible. Um, and even if there are things, I do this in the sets as well. Like sometimes people say, "Oh, like we opened the drawers and there was things inside the drawers, things that never you would, the camera will never see." But I think that those things are super important for the atmosphere on set. I think they're important for the actors and the director. And honestly, they're just like, for me, it doesn't feel finished unless we have that sort of level of completion and micro detail as well.
Now you have designed some of Marvel's most iconic spaces now from Loki and to Fantastic Four. Walk me through the process from the start when as soon as you pick up the script for the first time
Yeah.
all the way to when it's done. What comes to your mind? Do you have a protocol that you'll follow, or each project kind of varies a little bit?
I think there are some things that are definitely common to projects. The first thing that you're kind of concerned with most of all is the process of absorbing the script, absorbing the story, absorbing the kind of narrative intention. Like, what are the story priorities? What are the things from a design standpoint that are really critical to telling the story that the writers and the director are trying to tell? Um, and because until you internalize that, you can't really start to make your own plan, you know? Um, but then the next step becomes trying to take this script, which is a really rough blueprint basically for a film, and strategize uh, on how to bring these theoretical spaces to reality in a form that can be photographed. Um, so deciding what's a set and what's a location and what's more VFX based, um, and working with the director and the writer to discuss where certain scenes are set and see sometimes if they can be moved into other sets, because potentially, like we were always trying to do things in camera. So for instance, in Fantastic Four, if you think about the lab set or the Baxter apartment or the New York Times Square set, those were sets that were built. The lab, all three of those sets are um, very, very complete. The lab is fully 360. The other two are nearly 360, with the exception of a couple of blue screens in the corners. And that gives the camera and the director and the actors a lot of freedom in terms of when they're designing their blocking, and when they're, whether it's the performance blocking or the camera blocking or the shot design. But in order to build a completely immersive 360 practical set, that's very expensive. And you can't do that without getting enough scenes moved into those sets so that you have enough time being spent in the film in those environments to justify the cost of those sets. So this is a long-winded answer to your question, but basically one of the very important early processes are reading the script and going through it with the director and saying, can this scene actually move into this set that we already need to build? Because if we can do that, then we can spend more money on that set and make it even better and give you more of a complete set. So you have more flexibility when you're designing your scenes, and also to reduce the amount of set extension and visual effects work that's required. Inevitably for a movie like Fantastic Four, there's a huge amount of set extension and visual effects work that has to happen anyways. But to the extent that we can reduce that in terms of the world building, it's better, because they have so much work to do to make, CG Ben and, Johnny and Reed and Sue also have CG all the time. So there's so much with this, with the foreground of the shot that requires visual effects attention. As much as we can create the environment in camera, the better.
And it's fair to say that perhaps that's a part of that becomes a little overlooked, right? People are very interested about the aesthetic and the design, but there's so much behind management,
Yeah.
operation,
Yeah.
Everything really, even the secrecy around projects like this,
Yes.
how much of your time is dedicated to the fun part, let's say, the creation, the world building, and how much it is to make sure that that world, the engine is working well and you're delivering the goods on time, and you have all those discussions with everybody else, with the producer, director, so on.
I guess it varies from project to project, but I think if you're lucky, it's about 2/3 creative design and 1/3 logistics and planning, and your team is very helpful for that. The supervising art director, in this case, it was a really smart person named Nick Gottschalk, who was so good at taking a lot of the planning, the scheduling, and budgeting stuff off of my shoulder so that I could focus on the creative. And a brilliant team of art directors that worked under Nick, who took my kind of creative brief and really often were so good at problem solving things that a lot of it I didn't have to see. And it was only the kind of big questions that I had to get involved with when it became like, oh, we can't do this because of this and that. And we would try to come up with alternate conceptual ideas for how to solve some of those problems.
Well, First Steps looks and feels unlike any other Marvel film. Tell me a little bit about the inspiration that reached a futuristic and mid-century world.
Sure. This was a world that was about capturing the optimism and the future kind of the futurism and the joy uh, in looking forward towards both the future and towards the advances in technology that kind of defined popular culture in the first, half or two-thirds of the 20th century. Basically all the futurism that we saw from essentially the streamline era forward, into the jet age of industrial design, and all the stuff that we saw in comics and other media advertisements, novels, all of that hope of how technology was going to completely reshape the future, uh, but was very just pie in the sky in our timeline. In this timeline, because Reed Richards exists in that timeline and he's this kind of unparalleled genius figure, those are not just conceptual ideas in this timeline. In this timeline, those ideas come to fruition in real time as they're being imagined. We sort of imagine that the primary difference in this timeline to ours is the birth of Reed Richards. That if you think about, the movie's set in the mid 60s and Reed's probably in his mid 30s. So if you reverse engineer that, he's born approximately 1930. So then you think 20 years later, when he's about 20 years old in 1950, he starts to be able to really, his creations and his thinking start to affect the world. So then when you're looking at, for instance, the design of New York, you say, okay, anything that was built before 1950 maybe looks exactly like New York in our world. But anything
Mm.
after 1950, you might start to see some of his influence, some of the technology that he's designed, that he's put out into the world. Not necessarily saying that he's designed all that, the retrofuturism himself, but some of it he's designed and some of it is informed by technology that he's created or ideas that he's had that he's put into the popular kind of zeitgeist. Um, and so that's how we arrive at this kind of balance of realism, historical realism of New York and retrofuturism. It's about two-thirds historically accurate to New York and one-third retrofuturistic. There's also an
Okay.
important balance here because if you put too much retrofuturism in, then you lose the connection the audience has to the place. It just starts to look like an alien city or something. What's important and I think magical is the specific kind of cocktail of seeing it and saying, yeah, that's New York City. That's the Statue of Liberty. That's the Empire State Building. That's the Chrysler Building. That's Times Square. But look at all those retrofuturistic buildings. Look at the flying police cars. Look at the monorail. Look at the robots flying around the city, walking the dogs. Um, that's happened to the New York that we know.
Do you see the visual style that you created with your team, on not only in Loki but also on First Steps, influencing the rest of the MCU?
I mean, I don't know. I don't think so because those worlds I've been so lucky in the worlds that I've got a chance to design that they're very contained to themselves. Like the TVA is its own world. It's uninfluenced by um, other worlds in the MCU, and it also hasn't influenced visually other places in the MCU. And that's the same of the world, at least so far. That's the same of the world of the Fantastic Four. I think Kevin Feige this week said something about um, that some of the sets that we made for Fantastic Four will be potentially seen in Avengers Doomsday, which created this incorrect rumor that I was the production designer on Doomsday, which I am not. Um, but so I guess maybe it's starting to in that sense, maybe it will go into other parts of the MCU. But really, I think these are sort of these two kind of corners of the MCU that were not connected to anything. And I think, honestly, that's part of what's so fun about my job was to be able to invent something that was not obligated visually to things that had already been kind of created for the MCU. Of course, we're obligated visually to the legacy of the comics, the amazing work of Jack Kirby, and all honoring all the ideas of all the brilliant artists that worked on those comic runs. Um, but in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, these were kind of new and distinct worlds.
Definitely stand out. If you could design for another cinematic universe, let's say Star
Mm,
Wars, Dune, Blade Runner, whatever it is out there, do
yeah.
you have one in mind that you like to get a crack on it?
You know what? I mean, I admire all of those worlds, really. I think that they're really beautiful. I guess I in particular I admire the world of Dune, the recent kind of work that Denis Villeneuve and his really brilliant designer Patrice um, have done in creating that world of Dune. I think it's in my opinion it is very, very successful in fusing science fiction scope and ideas with an elegant and timeless kind of architectural language um, that I think is so elegant and emotionally appropriate for the story, and I think will serve those films to age well.
You said in a moment ago that you couldn't go too retro because the audience would lose connection to a little bit with it as well. And I thought it was an interesting point. And your
Mm.
work feels very emotional, almost like we remember that we've been there before somehow and we have seen it. So where does that design sensibility comes from?
I think part of it, I don't honestly know. I can say that my process is very rooted in architectural research, um, and that the detailing and the material selection and some of those kind of important smaller details are we try to really ground in the real world and try to always be careful of balancing the fantastical elements with familiar and grounded real world elements, um, so that we can maintain that connection. I mean, a lot of this is driven by what the specific requirements of the story are. So it's not like this is a philosophy that applies to everything. But certainly, this philosophy was relevant and helpful, I think, for Loki and for the world of Fantastic Four for Steps.
Was that a moment during the filming process or even before that really pushed you and your team? I mean, I believe a lot of times a project like this can come with a lot of challenge. And
Yeah.
there's one in specific that stood out, or perhaps something that you learned about yourself in the process that you didn't know it was there.
Hmm. I mean, there's always so many challenges with these things. Like if I don't think people, oftentimes fully realize the pace that we have to work at to create these things. From the time I started to the time that principal photography wrapped was about 13 months. So in 13 months, you're going from having nothing but a script to conceptualizing the entire world, uh, budgeting it, scheduling it, building it all, photographing it all, and taking it away after that. In 13 months, in that time we built New York's Times Square. We built two functioning Fantastic cars. We built, uh, Reed's Lab, the Baxter apartment, countless other sets. Um, so the scope of it is very challenging. And on this film in particular, there were some challenging scheduling parameters. Some of it to do with weather, some of it to do with the availability of certain people in the cast. So that the lots of things kind of conspired to make it so that we had to deliver most of our big sets very early in the shoot. So that's quite challenging to front load all that work. So we're working on the Fantasticar, the Times Square backlot, Yancey Street backlot, the lab. We're doing those all at the same time. So it's a huge team, lots of people, and for me, a lot of bouncing around all over the place. There was also a challenge for me in this film in that I had my second child was born in the first month that I was on this job. So that was really tricky timing to
No
balance.
kidding.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's impossible to have any conversation these days in the realm of creativity and design without mentioning AI. So I
Mhm.
want to hear your point. What do you think about how do you see the future of production design evolving now there's so much conversation around AI?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think it's still not so clear how it's going to be implemented, at least at the large studio scale. Um, I think AI is a very impressive tool. It's undeniable that it's an impressive technology. Um, the things that there's a lot of ethical questions about where those models are trained, what they're trained on, um, and that makes it kind of a fraught technology to use without kind of caveats or some kind of greater understanding of what those models are. I think that with that said, I think that there are other more ethical models being trained as well, and models being trained on data that is either owned by studios or like for Adobe's, for instance, it's trained on the images library that they own. I think that's a sort of a different proposition, and I'm curious as those technologies sort of become a little bit more sophisticated, how they might have a role in the filmmaking process. Um, in terms of innovation, though, it's hard for me to say that I'm super hopeful that or I don't know, hopeful is the right word or not, that super sure that it's going to be an important tool anytime soon in terms of the cutting edge of innovation in filmmaking. I could see it having a role in the more kind of rote tasks, maybe in visual effects and things like that. But I think it was somebody at Rockstar, the video game company. I don't know if it's the CEO. I can't remember. Said I'm paraphrasing. I can't remember exact quote was, but he's like he said something like uh, is not worried about AI undermining innovation or stealing that fire because AI is inherently backwards looking. It's literally trained on things that have been done before that are derivative. And so I think that in order to have novel solutions, you need to look forward. Um, and I don't know that it does that. I think another person, I can't remember who said this, uh, that said something about AI that I think is the most feels the most accurate, which is that it won't do anything to raise the ceiling, but it will dramatically raise the floor. So I can see now that already probably there's anybody can make a C level or B minus level image,
Hmm.
but I don't think anybody can make an A plus image or an A image or even a B plus image.
That's
I
a
think
great point
that
of view.
I think that takes a curated view skilled artisans to get to the level of excellence that I think sophisticated audiences are after.
Before I let you go, I usually ask our guests to recommend us a few things, and I would like
Yes.
your suggestion. Number one, I would like us to recommend us something to watch, a movie, a TV show, something to read,
Yeah.
something to listen to,
Okay.
and a skill to learn. And who should be our next guest? So a handful of recommendations.
Oh wow. Okay. Let's see. I'm not going to be able to think about it all at once. Now, what was the first question again? Sorry, the
A
first one.
film, or a movie, a TV show.
Oh gosh, there's so many. If you haven't seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, uh, and you want to see kind of what was a huge inspiration on Fantastic Four First Steps, the film by Kubrick is an extraordinary film. I think it's a visual lighthouse for so many directors, the great directors of our time. Now you can listen to their interviews, and 201, they reference this film. So if you haven't seen this film, absolutely do yourself a favor and go see it. I think another film I'll mention is completely different and is not at all relevant to Fantastic Four, but this film Barbarian.
Oh, it's
Uh,
amazing.
it's such a great film, and
Yeah.
I what I'm so impressed by with that film is it's actually it's less even about films or cinema. What I'm impressed by uh, in that film as a piece of artistic work is how innovative and original it feels, and that is so uncommon to come across a piece of media that makes you feel that way. So I think that's something that an interested audience should take a look at, because you start to watch it and you say, I've seen this before, and then it keeps surprising you one after another, and that's such a gift, I think, to the audience and to a viewer.
What about a
Um,
book?
oh, so many good books. Recently, I read. Uh, Gosh, I'm blanking on the author's name. Hold on. Let me tell you his name right now. The book is called Wellness, and his previous book is called The Nix. Um, and gosh, Nathan Hill. So
Okay.
The Nix by Nathan Hill, and also if you like that, Wellness. Uh, they're beautiful stories about sensitive character dynamics and interesting journeys and processing trauma and just trying to be just trying to be a person, the struggle of trying to be a person, told with sympathy and empathy and a little bit of humor. I really enjoyed those books recently.
And what about a skill? Something everybody should learn in life, perhaps to pursue your profession or something else?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that's a sort of a personal choice. I mean, I can say that for me, I started my career as a concept artist in the film business. I was a concept artist or illustrator, whatever you call it. And um, I think the best ones keep learning new skills and learning new software, um, and keep up with their life drawing and and keeping sharp on those skills. I did not do that. I did something very different where I decided to learn, instead of focusing on new skills within my um, kind of specific craft or trade, I wanted to learn skills outside of them. I wanted to learn how to write. So I made a risk in my career to, instead of focusing on building new skills, which was kind of risky as an illustrator, uh, to learn about screenwriting and learn about filmmaking, specifically directing. And I put a lot of time and effort into that, and I've enjoyed that a lot. And I've done my share of directing now, which is a great other job to have. But also, importantly, how it affects my view of design has been profound. And I feel that if I had just stayed focusing in a kind of intensive way, but in a small area on concept art or just design itself, I think maybe I wouldn't have had as much to offer as a designer. I think, basically, in a nutshell, find the other interests, the things that you're really curious about or passionate about that are outside of maybe what you do as your main occupation, and try to carve out some time to educate yourself and at least investigate those interests. You may find that you're not that interested, but you may find that there's something there, and it will change your perspective entirely. And maybe, I don't know, you maybe change your job, change your entire outlook.
And final, one like you to recommend as a guest, something that we should invite it to be here on the show next.
Oh gosh. I mean, maybe you should, I don't know, try to get Denis Villeneuve or Matt Shackman, or get a director and hear their take of you on that level of
Yeah.
what this process is like. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to work on that one for sure. Guys, so thank you so much
Cool.
for joining us. It's been thrilled to spend some time with you and learn a little bit more of the process. I mean, congratulations on incredible success. I'm sure you have many, many more exciting things coming our way, and we cannot wait to see it.
Thank you, Yuri. I appreciated that. And it was a pleasure to talk to you.